Kista. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Cognitive and Decision Sciences at the Faculty of Psychology at the University of Basel. I also completed my PhD at the University of Basel a couple of years ago, and my research was on individual differences in risk taking, specifically looking at age differences in the neural basis and also how we measure this construct of risk preference. And then after my PhD, I moved to the US and I completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Stanford University. This was made possible by an early postdoc mobility grant from the Swiss National Science Foundation. And there I was really specializing in a different kind of branch of neuroimaging research, also super fascinating. And now I'm back in Basel and I am pursuing two strands of research mainly. One is still about age differences in risk-taking and related constructs such as impulsivity, and also the neural basis for this. But also I like to kind of branch out a bit and explore, and so I'm also pursuing research on antisocial behavior. So the title of the paper is Age Differences in the Neural Basis of Decision-Making and Uncertainty. And I published this paper together with my co-author, Rui Mata. And in this paper, we were really interested in still the idea that people have to make decisions under uncertainty. So when I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, but we were interested in different types of uncertainty. So you can imagine that you could be unsure about what outcome your choice may have, but you could also be unsure about a temporal aspect of your choice. So what kind of consequences may this have in the future? And we were really interested in kind of comparing these different types of uncertainty, especially across the lifespan. And this had not been done so far. So previous literature had usually looked at either just individual types of uncertainty and also hadn't really looked at this on the neural basis. So we were actually using neuroimaging tasks to look at this both at the level of behavior, but also at the level of the brain. And yeah, so for this project, we invited quite a large sample. In the end, we invited I think 175 people between 16 and 81, and we scanned them in an MRI scanner while they were doing different tasks relating to uncertainty. And just really briefly, our findings, we actually did see that there were age-related differences in these neural mechanisms, and they were very much to do with sort of brain regions that are usually associated with reward processing, but also integration. But interestingly, we saw that this was also more profound, these age differences, they were more profound for one type of uncertainty than for another. And especially for uncertainty that relates to outcomes rather than the temporal aspect. So we would suggest that maybe this means that older adults, compared to younger, for example, they process gains and rewards potentially slightly differently. But when it comes to making choices about time or temporal aspects, maybe there the differences aren't so pronounced. So as a decision scientist who's interested in aging, it's a hugely fascinating topic because it's so close to everyday life. The idea is we constantly have to make decisions where we don't know what's going to happen. And actually, when you think about increasing lifespans, that also means we will have to make some of these decisions for longer. So imagine you have to pick between medical treatments or how you invest your money or when you get your pension. Those are all kinds of decisions you have to make, and they have slightly different uncertainties. And so I was interested in kind of understanding, how do people unpack these decisions? What are the factors that relate to that, and how do we deal with these different types of uncertainty? Because of course life is complex and the decisions we have to make, they're very complex. And so these different types of uncertainty, they meet us again and again in daily life. And so the idea was really to try and unpack this, understand this from a sort of a lifespan perspective, but also see whether we can learn something about the neural basis of these decisions. So winning the Stephen Karger Prize is a hugely positive and rewarding and joyful experience. I understand that Stephen Karger studied marketing and economics and was interested in psychology. So the alignment between his background and his interests and what we're doing in our work is super gratifying. And so in a way, it's also a super rewarding recognition of what we try and do with our work and the effort that my co-authors and I put into this project. On a professional level, it's an exciting opportunity to share our work and to get in touch with other researchers and connect with a broader audience. And on a personal level, it's kind of a reminder of why I do what I do and why I love what I do. Because I get to sort of explore really interesting ideas, I get to collaborate with super interesting people from all around the world, and I get to tell my students about it. And so winning the prize this year is a really rewarding experience. So that's a great question. So, of course, there are a lot of experimental paradigms I could think of that would go really deep into that question and compare even sort of maybe different populations, different manipulations that go into yet different types of uncertainty. And I think that would be fascinating and that would be great to do. So I think going deeper in the question that we already are asking ourselves, what are these different types of uncertainty? How are people dealing with it? Do they influence the decision? What are the neural correlates of that? I think that's already fascinating. But I also think that as a scientific community, I would think that we also have to branch out a bit more. And so the one thing that I am particularly interested in is sort of exploring ways to get more objective measures into our research. So, of course, we have very much control over the behaviors and over the paradigms in the lab, but it would be super fascinating to also include measures that tell me how are people actually making these choices in real life. So it's a way of calibrating what we know in the lab and what happens in the wild, so to speak. So that's the one thing. And the second aspect that I think would be really worth pursuing is also actually, if we want to know how people make decisions and help them make better decisions potentially, it would be useful to know how do people actually want to make these decisions or how do they make them. And the idea is that maybe as we grow older, maybe we don't want to make decisions in isolation. Maybe we want to consult with someone, or maybe we want to do this collaboratively. So actually trying to involve the individuals we want to study in the agenda setting of our research. So we figure out what is it that interests people, how do they make decisions. I think that would be a really nice way forward as well. So at the moment it's actually quite an exciting time. I just received a grant so that I can kind of branch out and explore some new agendas for research. And here the idea is I would like to explore decisions that are made in context where you have very pro-social motivations, but also there's a risk to your personal safety. So there is a tension between some of these motivations in some decisions. So for instance, think about, imagine you witness someone being harassed on the street. Now the pro-social aspect tells you go intervene, help this person, but of course you could become the target. And so here the idea is to try and understand how are people trading off these different considerations in these contexts. And the really interesting part is do this lifespan, of course, as someone with an interest in aging, but also we're going to include virtual reality methods. So that means we can safely study behaviors that would be unsafe or unpredictable in the wild, but still immerse people in really sort of real life situations and then see how they make this.